Jordan Davis is also one of them. You can't I see a bunch of people on social media. Well, you just plug in Milton Williams. They don't play the same position. Not even close.
You got a Tuesday edition of Birds 365. Anyway, thanks for streaming in with us. Jody McDonald, John McMullen, and our next guest, who I'm checking the Eagles injured list yesterday, and it's a projected Eagle list because they didn't really practice. And there he is right there with signified as rest was Ed Kracz. You got rest yesterday, huh, Kratzy?
Hey, there's no rest for me, Jody. Come on. I'm 24/7, man. I'm locked in all the time. There was no rest.
Maybe short week.
Short week.
You can't rest on a short week. Ed Kracz.
That's right.
That. I got to get better on a short week, and there's no time to do it. There's no time to do it, as I said. Ed saw it. Ed saw the spill. Ed was at ground zero of the spill, Jody McDonald. So I got to get better on a short week. The question is, are the Eagles going to get better on a short week, Ed Kracz? Trade deadline day, we're finally here. Lot of smoke about running backs. Are you going to see something from Howie Roseman before 4:00 this afternoon?
Robert Quinn's not enough for everybody. I mean, we're going to get greedy and try to get another guy here.
Greedy Williams. Maybe it's Greedy Williams because everybody is greedy. Everybody's greedy.
Well, that's where I think they need to turn their attention is to that secondary, more specifically safety. I don't know what they could get there. I mean, Chuck Clark, I don't think the Ravens are going to trade Chuck Clark. They're adding pieces, acquiring Roquan Smith. I saw David Ajabo, the rookie that tore up his knee on a pro day. He's close to being activated. So, you're not going to get Chuck Clark. What about Jesse Bates for the Bengals? They got hammered against the Browns on Monday night.
You're getting really greedy.
I know. You're not going to get – I think if you see anything, it's going to kind of be like a low-level move. Maybe you get John Abram from the Raiders. But that's where I think, you really need a third safety, in my opinion. I don't understand why everybody wants a running back or thinks they're going to get a running back. It could happen, but they like their running backs. You have Miles Sanders, who's going to get the lion's share of the carries. They love Trey Sermon, who they got on waivers from the 49ers. I mean, I think they're okay with their running back spot. Where they could really use help is at the safety spot or even a veteran corner to kind of back up Slay and Bradbury should something happen. But I'll be surprised if they make another trade today. I mean, maybe they trade Dillard. I don't think they will. I thought Brett Toth would be ready to go by now, but they haven't even activated his window. He would, in theory, be the backup left tackle to Jordan Mailata. But, at this point, they may just hang on to Dillard too and then see what happens at the end of the season. If they lose him, they probably get a comp pick for him if they lose him in free agency. So I don't know. I'm not sure. I think Howie will try, but I'm not sure there's really an obvious deal out there to be made.
Didn't the Eagles get the veteran backup cornerback that they needed via the practice squad yesterday with the huge Javelin Guidry signing?
It's a great name. Great name. I'll give him that. Great name.
And last year, I remember Gardner Minshew making plays against him in that Jet game. I'm not a big Javelin guy, but he's a veteran. He's been around. I think that's more of we got to cover our butt because of Josiah Scott, anything just as far as numbers go on the roster, on the practice squad. Javelin Guidry isn't playing for the Eagles this year, is he?
I would say it's probably a long shot, but yeah, Josiah Scott's a guy who that's an underrated injury. Who knows how serious that is? Nobody even asked Nick Sirianni about him on Monday. It was more the focus was on Jordan.
Well, we only had 5 minutes and it was over.
It's a short week, John. It's a short week. He's got
everything.
Boy, these guys are ridiculous with their short week stuff. I mean, come on. Do your 15 minutes. Do your 15 minutes. I'm just bitter because I didn't get a question in.
He had to take his kids out trick-or-treating.
Close Circuit Alley at the Eagles. Don't hop me again.
Yeah, well, I got the rare question in. Usually it's me that gets skipped. But anyway, that's there. Josiah Scott, that's interesting. I mean, his injury could factor into what they do today. I don't know anything about Javelin Guidry. You just kind of enlightened me there, Jody, as far as, you seeing him play last year.
He's a Jet. He was nothing special. The Jets' defensive backfield.
We saw that defensive backfield
was not good last year. There's a reason they took Sauce Gardner as high as they did, and they were lucky to get him because he's a big-time player. But, if Guidry couldn't make this team coming into the season, it tells you that he did not perform all that well, and I didn't think he was that good a player. He's been around, so if you like the veteran aspect of it, that's fine, but I think he's a guy who will spend whatever time he is as a member of the Philadelphia Eagles on the practice squad. I don't think there's any way he gets activated.
Yeah.
Well, you're right, though, Ed, in the fact that Josiah Scott's a little bit underrated, that injury, not only because she brought up safety on the trade market, and we'll talk about that in a second, but he plays safety as well. He can play safety. So he plays nickel corner. He can play safety. So you kind of lose two backups in one if you don't have Josiah Scott. And, Jody's right. You put a guy on the practice squad, you're kind of crossing your fingers. We need a body there, the Eagles are saying, but we don't want to use him. And these injuries, Jordan Davis is the first one. And obviously, Nick, with his competitive advantage, yada, yada, is not going to admit the seriousness, but did say he's not going to play on Thursday. Pretty much. Didn't even go that far, but said presumably he's not going to play on Thursday. He's not, in case anybody's wondering. There are certain positions that the Eagles can't afford to lose, and we just mentioned a couple of them. But Jordan Davis is also one of them. You can't I see a bunch of people on social media. Well, you just plug in Milton Williams. They don't play the same position. Not even close. I mean, he's the nose tackle. He's the zero technique, the one technique. They don't have an obvious player to put in for Jordan Davis. And that affects their ability to toggle from those 5-man fronts, those 4-man fronts back and forth. You could stick Marlon T in there, Marlon Tui Pelotu, but it's not going to be the same, Ed Kracz.
Well, yeah, nobody's going to be the same. And, I've seen people on social media wondering if they're going to trade for a D tackle. I don't think they would go crazy there because Davis is going to come back this year.
It's a 4-week injury. But
yeah, I mean, it kind of stunts his growth a little bit. Listen, I think he was ready to take off as far as his snap count goes. He had played 19 snaps already in that game against Pittsburgh before he got injured with 3:20 left to go in the first half. He had 19 snaps already under his belt. We were looking at a pretty heavy snap load for Jordan Davis on Sunday. And I think, in talking to Jonathan Gannon a little bit, I think that was kind of the plan, was they were going to come out of that bye week and they were going to up his snap count a little bit. And now he's not going to have that. He's going to come back. He's going to be kind of back to square one when he does return. So, it's a big loss. There's no doubt. I mean, Marlon T was the guy that filled in for him. He was kind of second team throughout the summer. He's not Jordan Davis. Not many are. Let's face it. Nobody's 6'6", 340 who can move their feet like Jordan Davis can. So it's a loss, no question. I wouldn't be surprised if they elevate Marvin Wilson from the practice squad for Thursday night's game, another body. To throw out on that defensive line to get a few reps. He had a very good summer, good training camp. But he's not Jordan Davis either. But what defensive tackle in the trade market are you going to bring in? You're not going to make a big move. I love the Steelers. The Steelers have some guys that can play defensive tackle. I love that Isaiah Loudermilk, a backup. You're not going to get Cam Hayward. But if they make a move,
it'd be nice to get Cam Hayward.
Oh, well,
yeah, that's
awesome.
Not gonna happen.
But that's not going to happen. But, maybe you make a trade for a lower level D tackle who can come in and maybe, play 5 to 10 snaps each game to kind of give you a different look up front. But more often than not, more likely than not, I should say, I think they'll probably just elevate Marvin Wilson from the practice squad. And, he still has all 3 elevations left. And again, getting back to Josiah Scott, he was very valuable filling in for Avonte Maddox in the slot when Maddox missed 2 games with the ankle injury. Andre Shasheri is a guy that can kind of play both safety. They were cross-training him at safety and slot, but he's out of practice squad elevation. So if they were to make a move with Scott going on the IR, I don't know how serious that ankle is, but maybe you bring up Andre Shasheri to fill that spot on the 53. So I think
it would help on special teams as well. Which
absolutely,
is,
they could use help there. But I think you'll see some kind of move. I mean, I know it's a short week, but I think you'll see some kind of a move, of significance this week as far as the maybe the roster goes. Maybe you get an addition. And again, I think Wilson comes up as an elevated practice squad guy.
All right, I want to run this by both you two guys. John and I haven't touched on this yet, so I want his take, but you first, Ed. We live in a different era. All three of us guys have been around long enough covering the league, and we did so before social media existed. And we now have social media, which can give you extra information and a better way to know certain things going on around the league, but it also can leave certain things in question. A.J. Brown, yesterday decided to take to Twitter to tell the world, the media here in Philadelphia, the fan base here in Philadelphia, that he was randomly drug tested. And he did so with a little bit of a dig, mentioning Roger Goodell by name, that this isn't as random as they think. It's right after I have a 3-touchdown, 150-plus yard game. Now you need to test me. And you don't know. You can't pick up nuance with social media. You don't know if he's doing it with tongue implanted in cheek and he's going for a laugh, or if he's actually kind of ticked off and is suggesting that, yes, the NFL thought, this guy's got to be taking drugs because he's having this kind of game. You don't know the way it comes out, but every Eagle's been tested this year. That's the National Football League. Those are the rules. And the first one who's needed to go to social media and comment on it was A.J. Brown. Am I even getting my panties in a twist for no apparent reason here that he was just going for a couple of yucks? Or should we tell AJ, just do what you're supposed to do here in the NFL? When you got to take a drug test, you got to take a drug test.
Yeah, I mean, there was really no context to that tweet. Like, had he been tested, in August, September? I mean, had he been tested at all this year? I mean, I don't know. I didn't really think too much of it. I just thought he was kind of, he's pretty active on social media. He puts stuff out there, and maybe he was just having a little fun. I mean, getting to know AJ a little bit these last couple of months. I mean, he's a pretty good guy. He's a pretty straight shooting guy, I think. And
yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. He's a very good guy. But
yeah.
As far as the Roger Goodell part, there's one thing I can guarantee: he's got no freaking idea who's getting tested on a day-to-day basis. I mean, that part of it's kind of silly, but hey, that's what the fans think. I mean, there's a lot of sort of similarities there when Roger Goodell is like he's sitting in his basement telling Jane Skinner, get AJ tested, he's having a great game. I mean, come on. That part of it's silly. The randomness of it, hey, your number's up. But AJ gets on because AJ's swole Batman, right? So my thought process behind that is AJ gets a lot of that in his personal life. Like, people question because he looks like he's carved out of a freaking marble slab. So people assume he's doing things he shouldn't be doing. I think it's got that more to do with that. So he's probably a little bit sensitive about that. That would be my guess is why. But I guarantee you, Roger Goodell has nothing to do with low level. Come on, he's above that. That part of it's silly.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's not the first time he's been tested. I mean,
he gets tested every year. Everybody gets tested every year. So he's been through it before. But
I think he was just having fun, to be honest.
Yeah,
he's in a great mood, man. He's loving this team. He even said everybody's having fun. You see Kelsey wearing the Batman mask on the sideline. These touchdown celebrations that the team has carved out. They're in the end zone dancing on their own to steal something from the Phillies. They're dancing with each other. Yeah. They're having a good time. And I just think that was part of his, continuing to have a good time and poke fun at Roger Goodell in the league.
Do you think part of it was, and again, maybe I'm overthinking this, and I said it here on Birds 365, said last night on WIP, the pointing the finger at the D-backs and the 15-yard penalty. Come on, I get it. There was a play that came down later in the day. The kid from Carolina, DJ Moore, makes a touchdown pass, gets it tight, takes his helmet off. You got no choice. You have to throw the flag there. it really put a damper on that game. But that's obvious. You can't do that. There's subjectivity to the whole celebration flag after. And he did a little point thing, and they threw the 15 yards at it. And yeah, I thought it was over adjudication by the NFL. Do you think that's why he went there and decided to add Roger Goodell's name to the tweet, because he was actually ticked off that he got the 15-yard celebration penalty?
Man, that's really digging deep. I mean, I just think he was caught up in the moment.
Yeah.
And then, maybe that was still sitting in his crawl and he wanted to get something out there on social media.
That's what I was thinking.
You could be right, but I mean, yeah, you can't point to people.
You can't point.
The very definition of taunting, and he did not just once but twice. He pointed to both those Steelers.
Now, if he pointed to the stands and did like a 1-2 thing, or he would have been fine. But the fact that he pointed, it's a dumb rule. I'll agree with you there, but it is what it is, and But the thing I was most impressed with AJ, and I said this yesterday on the show, Ed, he was the first guy on the podium after the game, and he didn't want to talk about his good plays. He wanted to talk about his bad plays. He dropped the one pass over the middle. He got caught, not a bad play, but he got caught from behind, and he said that's never happened before in the NFL to him. And he was upset. He was legit upset. And he's coming off a game where he's got a career high in receiving yards, a career high in touchdowns, and he's worried about the plays he didn't make. I think I talked about, Cincinnati losing to Cleveland. That's another example of why the Eagles are so good. They don't have those games. They don't lose to teams they shouldn't lose to, at least to this point. I think AJ is another indication of why they're so good. They're not celebrating what they're doing. They're upset about what they're not doing. Jalen Hurts constantly does that as well.
That's probably where they take their cues, is right from the quarterback, right from their leader. Is, they see Hurts or hear Hurts doing it, that, he's never satisfied. We talked to Landon Dickerson in the past. He could play he could grade out.
Landon thinks he's the worst player in the world.
Yeah, and again, another former teammate of Hurts's at Alabama. I mean, you're right. That's kind of, and you wrote about that, I believe. That's kind of one of the secrets to their success, is they don't, they're never coming out of a game completely satisfied. Even though I think that was the most complete game they've played against Pittsburgh. None of them were overly happy with what they did. They were happy, but they didn't come out and say, "Yeah, what a great game I had," and this and that. And I think they take that cue from Hurts. I think Jalen Hurts, it kind of starts it and it trickles down. We see Landon Dickerson do it, but he has a history with Hurts. So, I think you have to credit Jalen Hurts there for everything, you credit him for on the field. I think there's a huge piece to his leadership that's off the field as well. And that's probably one of them. Is he'll come in the locker room and he'll tell guys, "Hey, we still have the meat on the bone." That's one of the favorite sayings, left some meat on the bone and, some money on the table, all those cliches. But yeah, I mean, that's how Hurts feels, and his teammates feed off of that.
All right, Ed, part of what we do as members of the media, certainly we analyze and put in perspective things that have already happened, but you also like to look ahead and kind of guess and project and predict what's going to happen. So I'm going to ask you to make a prediction. What will Eagles defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon say today when asked about why he didn't get either backup cornerbacks or backup linebackers into the game in the fourth quarter in the last couple of minutes, when the offensive coordinator kind of emptied out his bench, got his offensive line off the field, got Miles Sanders, got Jalen Hurts off the field. But the defense, other than the usual rotation of the defensive linemen, stayed out there for the entire game. What will be Gannon's explanation when asked why didn't he give some of his backups some run in the blowout on Sunday?
Yeah, well, first he'll say Happy Tuesday, everyone, because that's the way he always.
This is after Happy Tuesday.
Yeah,
Hope he is happy because he's going to have to face that question. McMullen better ask it if nobody else does, by the way. But if it has to be you, Ed Kracz, so be it. What will Gannon say about why he didn't get some of his guys into the game after it had already been decided up by more than 3 touchdowns?
Yeah, to be honest, I was surprised Nakobe Dean didn't see any reps at all. I mean, when you're putting in your sub offense or second team offense, yeah, I thought Dean would certainly come in, and that's a good question. And I'm not sure how much of that decision was his. That might have come from the CEO Nick Sirianni himself. Like, hey, let's keep this team off the scoreboard. Let's keep.
Is that why Sirianni only did 5 minutes yesterday? He didn't want to field that question. It was his decision to not put the backup defensive guys in.
It may work. I mean, listen, he's the one that's calling all the shots, right? That's why he doesn't call the plays during the game, is because he likes to be involved with all three phases of the game. So it could have been his decision. Let's keep our foot on their, on the back of their necks, or whatever, however you want to say it. Let's keep them off the board. Let's keep our points per game.
Eddie, you don't really buy that, do you?
Well, I mean,
James
I don't know.
Steichen goes to him and says, listen, I want to get some of our starters off the field. Yeah, go ahead. Gannon goes to him and goes, I want to get some backup. No. We need to keep our starters out there. You don't really believe that the head coach would do something like that, do you?
Well, who are the backups, though? I mean, I guess like Milton Williams and Marlon T, the backups, they already played.
We're talking to Kobe Dean, and we're talking Zach Mack.
Yes.
The number one backup corner and the number one backup linebacker.
Those are the two for sure. Now, Zach Mack's got a big role on special teams. He made a great play down by the goal line.
I think Dean plays like every snap.
Yeah. I think
I'm talking about from the line of scrimmage. I'm not talking about special teams. Both of those guys could have used some run in the game in the fourth.
And I'd add Kayvon Wallace as well. He needs reps.
It's interesting. I don't know. Maybe that's just because they want to protect their points per game. They want to be, one of the top 5 defenses in the league. Their offense already put up 35.
Well, I hope that's not the case. I don't think that's the case, but I hope it's not the case. I think the dichotomy brings up the point. I don't have an issue with it if Gardner Minshew's not in the game. They took out the whole offensive line except for Landon Dickerson. Britton Kobe's even getting some reps at receiver. Cubby, I always say Kobe. One day I'll get it. So there was that dichotomy, and obviously defensive line doesn't count because that's a rotational position to begin with. But the back 7, everybody played. It was kind of weird. And I will be interested to hear Jonathan Gannon's thought process behind it. If you get a chance to get your guys a breather, especially on a short week,
right?
And those guys play a lot. Epsy and Chauncey, and if they're healthy, they're playing the whole game. TJ's playing the vast majority of the game. Obviously, the corners play the whole game if they're healthy. And Slay and Bradbury, they're veterans. Why not get Zach McPherson? I think it's a legitimate complaint. I do. I don't think it made a lot of sense.
Yeah, and those guys all played 100%. That secondary, except for Maddox, played every single snap, and even Maddox played a lot of snaps. But I guess you could have played McPherson in the slot. But really, what other corners did you have available?
Well, that's part of it. Josh Job was hurt. Josiah Scott
Blankenship was inactive.
Got hurt in the game. So maybe corner. They didn't have a lot, but Zach should have been out there. Wherever. It might have been for Slay or Bradbury, whichever, more likely Slay. But yeah, you only had the one guy. He should have been out there.
I would argue more for Dean than I would.
Yeah, it's those two guys. And anything more than that, they had some injury issues. They couldn't get it done. But John made the point. I read this today. I didn't even realize this. The Eagles only have one player who's played every snap from scrimmage this year, their side of the ball, and that's Epsy. He has not been off the field for one defensive play all year long. And God bless him, he's staying healthy and he's doing a nice job, but he can't get a playoff somewhere along the line. Come on, JG, you got to run this guy into the ground.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, Malcolm Jenkins went years without taking a playoff. It happens all the time at certain positions, but most NFL games are competitive. There aren't a lot of teams that can afford to take their good players out of games. And even if they're ahead by 13 points in the fourth quarter, we see it all the time. Bang, bang, all of a sudden you're losing. But the Eagles have these, And they've been, people have complained about the Eagles as dominant as they've been. Well, they didn't do this in the board. They didn't put their foot on their throat and all that. It's very rare you can feel comfortable taking your really good players, the players you count on, out of an NFL game. But here was a clear game where you could have done that. And they did it. That's the part that magnifies it, Ed. They did it on the offensive side. They didn't do it on the defensive side in the back seven. That part doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, maybe it's a different mentality. The defense is, let's not give this team anything. Let's just keep them down. We don't need to put our backups in. Let's just keep doing what we're doing and running our guys out there and not give them, any space to get up off the canvas. And offense was different. 35 points. That's, you got that locked up. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's just a different mentality of players or of, both sides of the ball. So, yeah, that's certainly something we can dive into with Jonathan later today and ask him his thoughts.
Yes, on a Tuesday, that's one question I'd like answered for you beat guys. You're very good at what you do. You need to get at least JG on the record of saying nothing, which is what I think he's going to do. I think he'll pull a Sirianni. He'll dodge the question as best he can. It's probable that the Jordan Davis is not going to play on Thursday. There's no blanking way Jordan Davis is playing on Thursday. No. But Sirianni will not give you that information until he absolutely has to. And I wouldn't be surprised if Gannon tried to dodge it as well. Kareem Hunt, is he going to be an Eagle within the next 6 hours? Mr. Kracz, do you think that the Eagles will and should be targeting a running back at this time? If they get him, I'm not going to complain, depending on what the price is. Just one more weapon for Hurts is not a bad thing, but I don't think it's a necessity for the Eagles to add a running back. Do you?
No, I don't. I really don't. And I think he's just more of a headache, to be honest. Not because of him as a person, but just the situation. His contract's up, Miles Sanders' contract's up, Boston Scott's contract is up. I mean, Nyheim Hines could be a possibility for the Colts. Everybody seems to think he's going to get traded, and he makes a little more sense, to be honest. First, his contract he signed.
And Nick loves him. Nick loves him.
I mean, he loves Zach Pascal, who he had in Indianapolis. He loves Nyheim Hines, who he had in Indianapolis, and his contract. You look at the contract. He's signed through next year. Now, it's probably a higher number than what the Eagles would want to pay. I think he's due like a $5 million base, if not more. I think he's got a salary cap hit of near $7 million. That kind of hamstrings you a little bit, but maybe you can kind of rework that. But, when you look at the running back room, they don't have any of the running backs signed through next year except Kenny Gainwell and Trey Sermon, if you want to count him too. So he makes more sense to me than Kareem Hunt because of the contract, because of the history with Nick Sirianni. And I just think that he's probably more likely to get traded than Kareem Hunt. I guess the Browns could, but that win Monday night gives them a glimmer of hope. Deshaun Watson will be back for them in 3 weeks. So, maybe you don't want to mess too much with your chemistry there in the backfield. But Nyheim Hines, the Colts are starting a rookie quarterback or a second-year quarterback in Sam Ehlinger. They're probably more likely to want to get a draft pick. But again, what draft picks does Howie have?
Yeah, he doesn't have any. Yeah.
He doesn't have a fourth, fifth, or a sixth. You're almost looking at 2024 draft capital. And is that enough? Or maybe you put Dillard in the deal. Dillard's a good insurance policy to have, so I'm not as sure he's going to be traded as I was maybe a week or so ago, and I thought Brett Toth would be available. But to answer your question, I think I would look at Nyheim Hines more than I would Kareem Hunt.
Then let's play this out. If they were to trade for Hines, they get him for whatever draft pick it is. Now you've got me mispronouncing it. Covey. Is he the guy who pays the price with the roster spot? Will they go 4 backs? Hines is a punt returner too,
right.
And
that's right.
Certainly better than Covey as well. Does he grab his spot on the roster? How do you get Hines onto the roster and into the games?
It would probably come at the expense of Britton Covey, to be honest. But yeah, you could say Hines is better at returning punts. But my contention is the Eagles just don't really do a good job blocking up for when Covey gets the ball. I mean, there's not a whole lot of room for him to create what he gets. I mean, he got a 5-yard return the other day. There was nobody blocking for him. So, I think we've all been pretty hard on Covey, and I say
I
that
love him.
I
I
like the
love
kid. I like
Covey
the kid a lot
personally, but as a
Yeah,
football player,
right.
he's
But
got.
I think if you get Hines, then who else would you would you get rid of there? And
Somebody's got to come off the roster.
maybe you trade him to the Colts. Maybe you trade Covey to the Colts. As
Well, I
part of that
think
deal.
from my perspective, if they were able to get Nyheim Hines, and you're right, Ed, I don't know how you get him because you don't have a fourth, a fifth, a sixth round pick.
Right,
So I
right.
mean, Indianapolis isn't going to. We'll wait till 2024.
Maybe.
I don't think they will. And those generally the way the league looks at that, it's not as valuable down the road. But if they did, and how he gets inventive, maybe he trades Andre Dillard for a couple picks. Maybe he gets a pick that way and flips that pick to Indianapolis. Maybe he gets inventive. If they get him, he's taking Kenny Gainwell's job as far as on the field. Now, they're not going to cut Kenny Gainwell. I would imagine Trey Sermon would be the one out the door. But he's taken Kenny Gainwell's job, and he's taken Britton Covey's job. He's taken both jobs on the field.
I wouldn't move Gainwell or whatever, cut him. I think
Boston, no, they're not going to cut Kenny, but
no, I think Boston Scott would be the one to go, to be honest. I mean, maybe you trade Gainwell, but Boston Scott to me hasn't really shown that same explosion that he's had. I know he hasn't had a lot of reps. He had 7 carries against Pittsburgh for 21 yards, but to me, he's not a guy. His contract's up at the end of the year. Maybe you include him in the deal for Nyheim Hines. I don't know, but I think Boston Scott would be the guy, not Kenny Gainwell. Again, Gainwell's still on his rookie deal. He still has value that way.
Well, no, I'm not saying, Ed, I'm not saying he gets cut, Kenny Gainwell. I'm saying he's losing his job on the field. He's no longer the third down back. He's just going to be on the roster.
Going to be an inactive on Sundays.
Yeah, he's going to be going to be an inactive. He's going to be on the 53 man. They're not going to give up on him. I think Boston is the backup to Miles Sanders, and I don't think that changes unless they get Kareem Hunt. Even if they get Nyheim Hines, I still think Boston remains the main backup to Miles Sanders. In other words, if Miles gets hurt, which he hasn't, knock on wood, but he typically has in years past, and they need a running back for the guy to carry the load for 2-3 games, that's Boston. That's not going to be Kenny Gainwell or Nyheim Hines. So you kind of flip roles, but Hines would be the third down back, the hurry up back that Kenny Gainwell is. That's kind of my take on how it would shake out.
And I'll give you my Boston Scott take. Ed's got him potentially going out the door if the Eagles get a running back. Johnny Mack says he's number 2. Oh, no, he's here for one reason only. They've got 2 games left against the Giants, and the guy flat out owns the New York Giants. If they had already played the Giants twice, then Boston Scott's roster spot would be in question. But since they have yet to face the Giants, he needs to stay on this roster. All right, Eddie K, you've got a 13.5 point. It's now gone up to 13.5. Eagles are a 13.5 point favorite in front of Houston. Can they just kind of like call the Texans and go, listen, we really don't want to get on the flight? Would you just forfeit the game so that we don't have to actually play it? Is this a no-low?
Well, that'd be great for me, by the way, if they forfeit. If the Texans want to forfeit, feel free.
Yeah, that's a long flight. I'm not looking forward to it.
Is it a blowout? That is the question I'm getting.
Well, listen, they could say, "Hey, why don't we just watch our baseball teams play in the World Series Game 5? Let's just take this one off. You guys get the win, and so be it." I would love that, but it's not going to happen. I think the short week could.
Stop. It's Davis Mills. The short week doesn't scare me. The Jordan Davis injury doesn't scare me. The Texans can't win.
How about 1,500 miles? That's the only thing that scares me. These Thursday night games, it's one thing to have a short week. It's another thing to have a short week and be the road team. And it's not a trip down I-95 to Washington or up the turnpike to the Giants. It's 1,500 stinking miles away. That is a tough road trip, but this team stinks, Ed. I'm just
I listen. I like some of their player. I mean, Damian Pierce, really good rookie running back. He could hurt you if the Eagles aren't, shutting down the run. He
no
could do
Jordan
some damage.
Davis.
No Jordan Davis, right? I mean, short week.
We're trying to come up with.
I'll put the over under right now at 55 yards. You gonna take over on Damian Pierce at 55 yards this weekend?
Boy, that's a good number.
I'm taking the over.
I'll take the over as well.
I'll take the under.
I think that's how much Jordan Davis means. Yeah,
and I just think that's how the Texans probably see this game is we have to be able to run the football and then make some plays with Brandon Cooks. Now, will Brandon Cooks still be a member of the Texans?
He'd be traded by then.
He could be traded today. So, but I
Jerry
think
Hughes might be gone. Houston has a lot of people on the trade.
I'll tell you the guy I'd like to see the Eagles get from Houston is Desmond King, the safety / cornerback, veteran guy, been around, couple different teams, doable contract, more so than another running back, which we've overtalked today, but we got 7 hours till the trade deadline. So that's why we're talking about as much as we are. I'd rather see him get a third string safety, have somebody there as a safety net for safety, and Desmond King could do that.
I don't see that player out there. You mentioned Jonathan Abram. I don't think he's a fit. He's a box safety. They want coverage safeties, but we'll see. I mean, they need a backup safety.
Desmond King is corner / safety. He's a coverage guy, Johnny Mac.
Yeah, maybe. They need a safety. We've kept Ed too long. I'll at Kracz E. Follow him on Twitter, si.com/NFL/Eagles. Read them there. Read me if you want as well to ruin your day. And I'll leave it here. But let's talk about the guy the Eagles did get. Little Bird told me he'd get 15 to 20 snaps on Friday. He got 20 snaps exactly. So happy Tuesday to him. I wasn't impressed. It looked like the same guy in Chicago. Couldn't get off anything.
He did have that one play that negated the sack that Brandon Graham had. It was interesting to see him and Graham lined up side by side out there, and Graham got the sack, but it was called off because of the hold against James Bradbury. So that was negated, but he was right there, and he was forcing the pressure from the outside that helped Brandon get home up the middle on that sack. So, I'm not ready to say he had nothing left. I mean, he was pushing the guy back a little bit. He did have one quarterback hurry. Still trying to find his way on a new team. So I'm not discouraged. I'm not down.
Well, it is early, but
I mean, it is
as far
as I think he'll be just fine in a 20 to 25 snap roll.
And by the way, he'll be up to speed this week because he got the entire week to practice. Oh no, that's right. The Eagles don't have the entire week, and the Eagles don't practice. So we'll see.
Nobody practices on these weeks. Nobody. Right. I mean, that's part of the problem with Thursday Night Football. Houston's not practicing either. Trust me.
Eddie K, we appreciate it whenever you do come on. Thank you much for joining us today. Hopefully Howie Roseman keeps you busy before the afternoon is over and you got a trade to report on for SI. Thanks for jumping in with us here on Birch 365.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.